This is a quick demonstration of 3 different methods of knitting with beads that have been pre-strung onto yarn. I'm going to start with a beaded cast on. You can do pretty much any cast on you like. I'm going to show a long tail cast on, but this is fine with a knitted cast on or cable cast on or double twisted loop cast on, pretty much anything. So you're going to get your first stitch. You can tie a slip knot if you want, but what I do instead is I catch this strand and give it a twist so I don't get a knot at the bottom. And I'm going to cast on one more stitch. So whatever cast on you want to do, 2 stitches, and then you're going to push up a bead as close as you can to that last stitch. Be careful you don't end up pushing all the way through onto the yarn that's on the needle. We want it dangling below. Ideally your beads will stay in place where you put them, but if they're sliding down, just use your other hand to kind of hold into place. Then I'm going to cast on 2 more. And you don't want to cast on super tight, but this might need to be a bit more firm than sometimes. And see, what we're looking for here is the bead to be hanging down below the stitches on the needle. We never want it to be on the yarn that's around the needle. I'm going to push up another bead and we'll cast on 2 more. And just here I'm making sure that that bead stays in place by going a little slow as I tighten it. And every 2 stitches I'll push up another bead. And continue on until I have as many stitches as I need for my project, ending with 2 stitches after the final bead. So this is a really nice simple edge. Gives a little something special to your project. It depending on your cast on will show more on one side or the other. The long tail cast on, it shows most on the side that was away from me as I cast on, but the beads do dangle below, so you can kind of see them here on the side that was facing me. So because they're more visible here, I'm going to start with a right side row, and I'm just going to knit a row and purl a row kind of quickly to get away from where these beads are at the edge so you can see the next technique. And because I'm not using beads at all on these first 2 rows, as they get kind of creeping up in my hand, I'm just going to push them, an arm's length or so away. The distance will be varied based on how often you're using the beads and how long your row is. So I'm going to purl 1 more row here. Now the next technique is going to be a bead that is put between 2 stitches. Now the bead naturally falls towards the purl side of the work. So if I wanted to have this purl side be the right side of the work, so reverse stockinette for my pattern, I could just push up the bead between any 2 stitches and it would land on this side. If I was doing garter stitch or all knit every row, I could push up the bead between any stitches on a wrong side row and the bead would naturally land on the right side. But let's pretend that I want stockinette stitch or the knit side of the work to be what's visible. So here with my kind of bead maintenance, I'm going to leave a handful of beads, maybe 4 or 5 because I don't have too many stitches, and push the rest down. There's a lot of moving of beads as you do this. So I'm going to switch over to holding the yarn in my right hand or throwing for a few stitches here. Now what I would do when it's time for my bead, I'm going to bring the yarn to the front, I'm going to purl a stitch, and then I'm going to push up a bead very close to that last stitch that I just purled, and then I'm going to purl a 2nd stitch. Because the bead naturally wants to fall to the purl side of the work, if I want stockinette fabric, I need to nestle the bead between 2 purl stitches. I'm going to switch hands again and show this as I am picking rather than throwing, which I just showed. So again, I'm going to get to where I want my bead to be. I'm going to bring the yarn to the front. I'm going to purl a stitch, and then I'm going to slide a bead up, kind of push them a little farther than I needed to here. Slide a bead up, purl a 2nd stitch, and then continue knitting. And so here you can see I get a little texture from those purl stitches, but the beads are definitely on the right side of the work. They do not show on the wrong side. So I'm just going to push my beads away, purl another row kind of fast, and we will do one more method, which is beads that are in front of slipped stitches, which is my favorite way to put beads on my knitting, if they're pre-strung at least. because it's a little sneakier, because here you can really see that texture, which is great, and it could be fun to fit it into a knit purl pattern. but sometimes I don't want the texture. So again, I'm going to switch over to throwing with the yarn in my right hand. So when I want a bead, I'm going to bring the yarn to the front. I'm going to slip a stitch purlwise, and then I'm going to slide up a bead and bring the yarn firmly to the back. You don't want extra yarn here, so give it a little tug. Make sure that bead's sitting on the front here. And then I'm going to continue knitting until I want to do my next bead. Let's stagger them between the other ones because it looks nice. So yarn to the front, slip a stitch purlwise, slide up bead and bring the yarn firmly to the back. Don't leave extra because then it can sag. And then you're going to continue knitting along. And let me show one with the yarn in my left hand for folks who do that. Now, as you get into a project, you might be able to sort of leave your beads on your yarn where you're going to need them. I'm not in the zone of that yet. But here we go. Yarn to the front, slip a stitch purlwise, and I'm going to pull up my bead, bring the yarn firmly to the back. If you need to, you can hold onto the bead with your thumb of your other hand, and then keep going. So here, the beads are a little bit more subtle in terms of the stitch pattern. It looks pretty smooth. I'm going to purl a row just so you can see it a little bit more. And I can feel these beads rocking up in my hands. I'm just going to push them down a ways. There we go. So here are our 3 methods for beads that are pre-strung on the yarn. We have them pushed up between cast-on stitches. We have them nestled between 2 purl stitches so that they land on the knit side of the work. And we have the beads in front of slipped stitches. So you can see there's that little float of the slip stitch yarn, and then the bead is hanging out on that. So have fun practicing.